"It's Mommy's last Christmas," she cried. Mafia boss heard her wish and changed both their lives. Northbridge was a city of sharp, unforgiving edges, especially in December. It was a place where the winter wind did not just blow but bit down hard, rattling the loose window panes of the tenement buildings that lined the working-class district. Here, the holiday season did not look like the glossy advertisements in the magazines. It looked like strands of cheap, plastic lights strung haphazardly across fire escapes, flickering and dying in the freezing rain. It smelled of exhaust fumes, wet wool, and the greasy, comforting scent of fried onions drifting from cramped apartment kitchens. Yet, if one looked up, past the gray water towers and the tangled power lines, they could see the other Northbridge, downtown. The glass towers of the financial district pierced the low-hanging clouds like needles. In that world, Christmas was golden and warm. It was the soft clinking of crystal glasses and the murmur of polite conversation in places like Russo's, the Italian restaurant that served as the crown jewel of the city's dining scene. But for the people living in the shadow of those towers, the gold was just a distant glimmer, as unreachable as the stars. Emily Carter pulled her coat tighter around her throat as she stepped off the crosstown bus, the slush under her boots seeping through the worn soles. The cold air hit her lungs like shattered glass, triggering a familiar, squeezing ache in the center of her chest. She paused, leaning her shoulder against the graffiti-covered brick of a corner store, and forced herself to breathe shallowly until the spasm passed. She could not afford to stop. She could not afford to be sick. At 28. Emily wore the exhaustion of someone twice her age. Her day had started at 6 in the morning at the hospital reception desk, answering phones and filing paperwork under the harsh fluorescent lights. Now, as the sun went down and the streetlights buzzed to life, her second life began. She pushed through the doors of Sal's Diner, a greasy spoon that sat on the border between the struggling neighborhoods and the industrial district. The heat inside was suffocating, smelling of old coffee and bleach. "You are late, Carter," the manager barked from behind the counter. He was a thick-set man with grease stains on his apron and no patience for excuses. "I know, Sal. The bus was delayed by the snow," Emily said, her voice steady despite the rapid thumping of her heart. "I will make up the time." She did not wait for his response. She moved to the back, swapping her heavy coat for a stained apron. For the next 5 hours, she was a blur of motion. She poured coffee, balanced plates of meatloaf, and smiled at truckers who left $2 tips. Every time she lifted a heavy tray, she felt the strain in her chest, a reminder of the defect she had been born with and had ignored for too long. But every time the pain flared, she thought of Lily, who was 6 years old and believed that magic was real. Lily, who was currently at the neighbor's apartment, waiting for her mother to come home and read her a bedtime story. For Lily, Emily would carry the world, even if her heart gave out under the weight. By the time Emily climbed the 4 flights of stairs to their tiny apartment, it was past midnight. The hallway smelled of boiled cabbage and damp plaster. She unlocked the door quietly, trying not to wake her daughter, but as she stepped into the dim living room, she saw a small shape sitting up on the pull-out sofa. "Mommy?" Lily rubbed her eyes, her hair a tangle of blonde curls. Emily's heart melted, the pain in her chest momentarily forgotten. "Hey, sweetie." "Why are you awake? I was making it ready for Santa," Lily whispered. She pointed to the single window that overlooked the alley. Emily looked. Taped against the drafty glass were 6 paper snowflakes, cut from notebook paper with painstaking care. They were jagged and uneven, but in the glow of the streetlight outside, they looked beautiful. "They are perfect," Emily said, her throat tight. She sat on the edge of the bed and pulled Lily into her arms, burying her face in the child's soft hair. It smelled of cheap strawberry shampoo and innocence. Lily pulled back, her eyes wide and serious. "Mrs. Gable said that if we make the house look pretty, Santa will not skip us this year. Even if we do not have a chimney, he would never skip us," Emily promised, ignoring the knot of anxiety in her stomach. She tucked Lily back in, waiting until the girl's breathing evened out into deep sleep. Then, Emily walked to the small kitchenette. She opened the drawer where she kept the silverware and reached all the way to the back. There, hidden beneath a stack of napkins, were 3 envelopes from the hospital. They were marked urgent in bold red letters. She did not open them. She did not need to. She knew what they said. The co-payments were overdue. The tests showed deterioration. The clock was ticking. She closed the drawer, her hand trembling, and turned off the light. Across the city, in the private back room of Russo's, the air smelled of expensive cigars and aged leather. The noise of the main dining room was muffled here, reduced to a dull hum. Adrian Russo sat at the head of a mahogany table, a glass of dark red wine untouched in front of him. At 35. Adrian had the kind of face that stopped conversations. It was handsome, certainly, with sharp cheekbones and dark, intense eyes. But it was also cold. It was the face of a man who had seen everything the city had to offer, and found most of it wanting. 2 men sat across from him, Marco, older and scarred, and Dante, young and reckless. They were his lieutenants, his family in the only sense that mattered anymore. "Victor is pushing into the docks," Marco said, his voice a low rumble. "He hit one of our shipments last night, 2 crates of electronics gone. He's testing the waters." Adrian swirled the wine in his glass, watching the crimson liquid coat the crystal. Victor Delano has always been a greedy man. He mistakes patience for weakness. "We should hit him back," Dante said, leaning forward. "Hard. Send a message that Northbridge belongs to the Russos." "Not yet," Adrian said. His voice was quiet, but it carried absolute authority. Dante leaned back instantly. "The police commissioner is asking questions again," Adrian continued. "He's sniffing around the construction contracts. If we start a war in the streets now, we give him the excuse he needs to come down on us. We handle Victor quietly, cut off his supply lines. Starve him out." He took a sip of the wine, the taste bitter on his tongue. He looked around the opulent room, filled with the spoils of his empire. He had money, power, and fear. He had everything a man in his position was supposed to want. Yet, in moments like this, when the business was done and the silence crept in, he felt a hollow ache in his chest that had nothing to do with heart disease. It was the same ache he had felt 20 years ago, standing in a hospital waiting room while his mother died alone because his father was sitting in a jail cell. It was the grief he had buried under layers of ice and concrete. He was the king of Northbridge. But most nights, he felt like a ghost haunting his own life. 2 days later, the fragile balance Emily had been maintaining shattered. She'd been called into Dr. Evan's office during her lunch break. The cardiologist was a kind man with tired eyes, the sort of doctor who worked at the community hospital because he actually cared, not because it paid well. He sat Emily down and placed a tablet on the desk, showing a pulsing, grayscale image of her heart. "I am going to be blunt with you, Emily," he said gently. "The medication is no longer working. The valve is failing faster than we anticipated." The room seemed to tilt. Emily gripped the arms of the chair, her knuckles turning white. "What does that mean?" "It means you need the surgery, Doctor," Evans said, "and you need it soon." "Within the month?" Emily felt the blood drain from her face. "A month? But the insurance denied the pre-approval. They said it was a pre-existing condition loophole. I'm still fighting them." "You do not have time to fight them," the doctor said, his voice heavy with regret. "If we do not operate, the strain on your heart will become critical. One bad episode could be fatal. Fatal." The word hung in the sterile air like smoke. "What are my chances?" Emily whispered. "If I do not get the surgery?" "Doctor." Evans looked down at his hands. Low, very low. "You might not see the spring." Emily walked out of the office in a daze. She moved through the hospital corridors like a sleepwalker, the sounds of paging systems and rolling gurneys muffled by the rushing of blood in her ears. Not see the spring. She would not see Lily turn 7. She would not see her lose her first tooth. She turned a corner and nearly collided with a janitor's cart. She stopped, leaning against the wall to catch her breath, fighting back the tears that threatened to blind her. She did not see Lily sitting on a bench near the nurse's station. Lily had been dropped off by the neighbor after school because the neighbor had a shift, and Emily was supposed to get off in 10 minutes. The little girl was swinging her legs, holding her worn stuffed reindeer, listening. She had heard the doctor talking to a nurse at the station just moments before. That poor woman, the nurse had said, leaving a kid behind at that age. It is a tragedy. Lily did not understand all the words. She did not know what a valve was, but she understood leaving behind. She understood the tone of voice adults used when bad things were happening. That night, the apartment was quiet. The wind howled outside, rattling the window frame where the paper snowflakes fluttered. Emily was sitting at the small kitchen table, staring at a pile of bills. When she felt a small hand on her arm, she jumped, turning to see Lily standing there in her mismatched pajamas, clutching the reindeer. "Mommy?" Lily asked. Her voice was small, trembling. "What is it, baby? Bad dream?" Emily asked, forcing a smile onto her face. Lily shook her head. "Mommy, are you going to disappear?" Emily froze. "What? Like Grandma did," Lily said, her eyes filling with tears. "Grandma went to the hospital and she never came back. Are you going to go away too?" The question tore through Emily's defenses. She pulled Lily onto her lap, wrapping her arms around the small, warm body. She wanted to scream. She wanted to wail against the unfairness of it all. Instead, she smoothed Lily's hair and lied. "No, baby, no. I'm not going anywhere. I am right here. But the nurse said—" Lily began, a sob hitching in her chest. "The nurse was wrong," Emily said fiercely. "Listen to me. I am going to be here for Christmas, and for your birthday, and for 1,000,000 days after that. Okay?" Lily nodded, burying her face in Emily's shoulder. "Okay, Mommy." Emily held her daughter until the girl fell asleep again, rocking her back and forth in the dimly lit kitchen. She made the promise, but as she looked at the urgent letters on the table, she knew she had no idea how to keep it. The following Saturday was the annual Christmas Wish Night at the Liberty Heights Mall. It was a massive event, complete with a 30-foot tree, artificial snow falling from the atrium ceiling, and a professional Santa Claus seated on a velvet throne. The event was advertised as a community celebration, but in reality, it was funded entirely by Adrian Russo. It was a tax write-off, a way to clean a significant amount of cash, and a public relations move to keep the city officials happy. Adrian stood on the second-floor balcony, looking down at the crowd. He wore a long, tailored wool coat over a charcoal suit, his hands in his pockets. Below him, hundreds of families milled about. Children screamed with delight. Music blared from speakers, and the air smelled of cinnamon pretzels. To his left, Marco stood with his arms crossed, scanning the crowd for threats. "We have security at all the entrances." "Boss," Marco said, "it is clean." "Good," Adrian murmured. He did not really care about the festivities. To him, it was just noise. It was a reminder of things other people had, things he had forfeited a long time ago. He watched a father lift a toddler onto his shoulders and felt that familiar, cold distance. He was the architect of this joy, but he could never partake in it. "Let us go down," Adrian said suddenly. "I want to check the setup near the stage." Marco looked surprised, but nodded. They took the escalator down, moving through the crowd like sharks swimming through a school of fish. People instinctively parted for them, sensing the danger that radiated from the men in expensive suits. Near the center stage, the line for Santa wound around the fountain. Emily stood near the velvet ropes, holding Lily's coat. She looked pale, dark circles bruising the skin under her eyes. She had picked up an extra shift the night before and had not slept in 24 hours. "Go on, Lil," Emily said, giving her daughter a gentle nudge. "It is your turn." Lily stepped up to the platform. She was wearing her best winter coat, a red one that Emily had bought second-hand. It was slightly too big in the shoulders. But Lily loved it because it looked like something a movie star would wear. She climbed onto the massive chair, the Santa, a jovial man with a real beard who was being paid $300 an hour, smiled down at her. "Ho, ho, ho," he boomed. "And what is your name?" "Little one?" "Lily," she whispered. "Hello." "Lily, and have you been a good girl this year?" "Yes, sir." The Santa leaned in. "Well then, tell me. What would you like for Christmas? A doll, a bicycle?" Lily looked down at her hands. She twisted the fabric of her red coat. She took a deep breath, her small chest heaving. "I do not want toys," she said. The Santa blinked. "No toys? Well, that is unusual. What do you want then?" Lily looked up, and her voice, though high and childish, carried a devastating clarity that cut through the murmur of the crowd. "I want my mommy to stay," she said. The Santa looked confused. To stay? Lily's lower lip trembled. She began to cry, the tears spilling over her cheeks. "I heard the doctor. He said her heart is broken." She took a gasping breath, and then the words came rushing out, loud and desperate. "It is Mommy's last Christmas," she cried. "That is what I heard. Please, Santa, I do not want a bike. I just want her to be okay. Please do not let her disappear." The words seemed to hang in the air, suspending the noise of them all for a heartbeat. Adrian Rousseau was passing directly behind the stage set when he heard it. "It is Mommy's last Christmas." The sentence hit him with the force of a physical blow. He stopped mid-step, his boot freezing on the polished tile floor. The breath left his lungs. Suddenly, the mall faded, the lights, the music, the crowd, it all vanished. In his mind, he was 15 years old again. He was standing in a cold, sterile room, smelling antiseptic and fear, listening to his mother whisper that she was sorry she would not see him graduate. He felt the crushing weight of helplessness, the rage at a world that would take the only person who loved him while he stood by, powerless despite all his strength. "Boss?" Marco asked, stepping closer. "You okay?" Adrian did not answer. He turned slowly, his gaze locking onto the scene on the stage. He saw the little girl in the oversized red coat, her face wet with tears. He saw the Santa looking helpless, not knowing what to say, and then he saw the woman. Emily had stepped forward, her face a mask of horror and heartbreak. She rushed onto the platform, ignoring the elf helper who tried to stop her. She scooped Lily up into her arms, pulling the girl's face into her neck. "Shh, baby, shh," Emily whispered, her voice cracking. But in the silence of the immediate area, Adrian heard it clearly. "I am here. I am here." He watched the woman's hands tremble as she stroked the girl's hair. He saw the fraying cuffs of her coat. He saw the way she held the child, as if she were trying to physically shield her from death itself. Adrian stared. His face, usually a mask of stone, cracked. A flicker of raw, unpolished emotion passed through his eyes, shock, recognition, and a sudden, piercing agony of empathy. He knew that look in the woman's eyes. It was the look of someone standing on the edge of a cliff, fighting with everything they had not to fall, solely because someone else needed them to stand. "Find out who they are," Adrian said. His voice was low, rasping, as if he hadn't used it in years. Marco followed his gaze. The woman and the kid? Adrian did not look away. He watched Emily carry Lily off the stage, her steps unsteady, her face buried in the girl's shoulder. "Find out everything," Adrian commanded, the steel returning to his voice, but tempered with something new, something dangerous. "Names, address, what doctor they are seeing, everything. Why?" Marco asked, confused. Adrian watched until Emily disappeared into the crowd, the red of Lily's coat swallowed by the sea of shoppers. "Because," Adrian said, turning away, the ghost of his past settling heavily on his shoulders, "no one should have to beg a mall Santa for their mother's life." He walked away, leaving the festivity behind, but the echo of the little girl's cry followed him, piercing the armor he had spent 20 years building. It is Mommy's last Christmas. Not if he had anything to say about it. The office at the back of the restaurant was silent, save for the rhythmic ticking of a grandfather clock that had stood in the corner for 50 years. Adrian Rousseau sat behind his desk, a sprawling expanse of dark oak that felt more like a barricade than furniture. The memory of the previous night, the girl's tearful plea to a mall Santa, the mother's desperate eyes, still clung to him like smoke from a fire he could not put out. He looked up at Marco, who was standing by the door, waiting for orders. Marco was a man of few words, built like a brick wall and just as immovable. but he looked uncertain now. "I want you to find them," Adrian said, his voice devoid of inflection. Marco frowned slightly. "The woman and the kid from the mall? Yes. I want names. I want an address. I want to know where she works, and, more importantly, I want to know about her medical situation." Marco shifted his weight. "Boss, with all due respect, we have the union negotiations coming up and Victor breathing down our necks." "Is a charity case really the priority right now?" Adrian's eyes narrowed, the temperature in the room dropping several degrees. He could not explain the ache in his chest, the way the phrase "Mommy's last Christmas" had echoed in his nightmares. He could not admit that he saw his own mother's face in that woman's terrified expression. In his world, empathy was a weakness, and a weak boss was a dead boss. "We sponsored the event." "Marco," Adrian said, lying with the smooth ease of a career criminal, "it looks bad if we have people crying about dying on our stage and we do nothing. It is a loose end, a public relations liability. I want to know if the story is true or if she was just grifting for sympathy. If it is real, we handle it quietly to boost the charity's reputation. If it is a scam, we make sure they do not come back." Marco nodded, accepting the logic. It was cold, calculating, and made perfect sense. Understood. "I will put a tail on them today." Adrian turned his chair toward the window, dismissing him. As the door clicked shut, he let out a breath he did not realize he had been holding. He was justifying his interest, wrapping it in business terms, but his hands were gripping the armrests of his chair tight enough to turn his knuckles white. The lunch rush at the diner was a chaotic symphony of clattering plates, sizzling grease, and shouting voices. For Emily, it was a battlefield. "Order up on table 4, Sal shouted from the pass-through window, slamming a plate of fries onto the metal counter. Emily grabbed the plate, her fingers trembling slightly. The dizziness had started an hour ago, a slow, spinning sensation at the back of her skull that made the checkered floor tiles seem to warp and shift. She swallowed hard, forcing her eyes to focus. "Coming!" she called back, though her voice sounded thin to her own ears. She moved toward table 4, navigating the narrow space between the booths. The air in the diner was thick and hot, smelling of burnt coffee and bacon fat. It clung to her skin, making it hard to breathe. Her heart was doing that frightening thing again, skipping beats, then racing to catch up. A frantic bird trapped in her ribcage. She reached the table where a man in a grease-stained mechanic's jumpsuit was waiting. He was tapping his fork impatiently against the formica. About time. He grunted as she set the plate down. "You forgot the ketchup." "I am sorry," Emily said, reaching for the bottle in her apron pocket. "I have it right here." She tried to hand it to him, but a wave of black spots danced across her vision. Her knees buckled for a fraction of a second, and she had to grab the edge of the table to keep from going down. The ketchup bottle slipped from her fingers and hit the floor, rolling under the booth. "Hey, watch it," the customer snapped, pulling his legs back. "Are you drunk or something?" Emily blinked, the world slowly coming back into focus. "No, I am sorry. I just got dizzy." Sal was there in an instant, his heavy boots thudding against the floor. "What is the problem here?" "She is dropping things," the customer sneered, acting all spacey. "I have been waiting 20 minutes for a burger and now she is throwing condiments at me." Sal turned his glare on Emily. "Carter, get it together. This is not nap time. If you cannot handle the shift, tell me now so I can find someone who wants to work." "I can handle it," Emily whispered, humiliation burning her cheeks. The other customers were staring. She could feel their eyes on her, judgmental, annoyed. They saw a clumsy waitress. They did not see a woman whose heart was slowly failing her. They did not see the mother who was working herself to death for a pair of winter boots for her daughter. "Then pick up the bottle and get table 6 their coffee," Sal barked. "You are moving like molasses today." Emily bent down to retrieve the bottle, the movement making her head swim violently. She squeezed her eyes shut for a second, silently repeating Lily's name like a mantra. Lily, Lily, Lily. She stood up, pasted a smile on her face, and went back to work. By the time her shift ended, it was past 11 at night. The snow had started falling again. thick, wet flakes that coated the city in a deceptive blanket of silence. Emily walked out the back door of the diner, wrapping her thin scarf around her face. The alley was dark, illuminated only by the sickly yellow glow of a distant streetlight. She was exhausted, her bones aching with a deep, marrow-level weariness. All she wanted was to go home, kiss Lily's sleeping forehead, and collapse. She did not see the figure stepping out from behind the dumpster until it was too late. "Well, look who it is." Emily froze, her heart hammering a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She knew that voice. It was a voice that used to whisper sweet lies and shout angry threats in equal measure. Tyler. He stepped into the light, a cigarette dangling from his lip. He looked the same as he had 3 years ago, lean, ragged, with a cruelty in his eyes that he mistook for toughness. He was wearing a leather jacket that was too thin for the weather, shivering slightly. "You look like hell." "Em," he said, looking her up and down. "What do you want, Tyler?" Emily asked, clutching her purse strap with both hands. "I do not have any money." He laughed, a harsh, barking sound. "You always say that, but you are working 2 jobs, right? Hospital and the diner. You have got cash. It goes to rent and Lily," she said, her voice rising. "Leave us alone." Tyler took a step closer, crowding her against the brick wall of the diner. He smelled of stale beer and cheap menthols. "Do not talk about my daughter like she is some bill you have to pay. I have rights, you know." "You gave up your rights when you walked out on us," Emily said, surprised by her own boldness. Her fear was there, pulsing in her throat, but beneath it was a fierce, protective anger. "You have not seen her in 2 years. "Yeah. Well, maybe I am ready to be a dad again," Tyler sneered. "Or maybe I think she would be better off with me. I hear you are sick." "Em, sick people cannot take care of kids. If you act too sick to work, maybe I call social services. Tell them you are unfit, unless—" He let the threat hang in the air, rubbing his thumb and forefinger together. "Unless I pay you," Emily finished, disgust curling in her stomach. "Consider it child support in reverse." Tyler grinned. $50. "That is all I need tonight. I do not have it," Emily said firmly. "And if you try to take Lily, I will call the police." Tyler's face darkened. He reached out, grabbing the sleeve of her coat. "Do not threaten me. Emily, you think the cops care about—" Suddenly, bright white headlights swept across the alley entrance, blinding them both. A large black vehicle had turned the corner and slowed to a crawl, the engine purring with a deep, menacing rumble. Tyler flinched, releasing her arm and stepping back, shielding his eyes. What the— The vehicle, a massive SUV with tinted windows, did not move on. It stopped right at the mouth of the alley, idling. It was a predator pausing to observe. Tyler looked from the car to Emily. His nerve breaking, he was a bully, and like all bullies, he was a coward when faced with something bigger than himself. "This isn't over," he hissed at her, backing away into the shadows. "You better have something for me next time." He turned and ran, slipping on the slush as he disappeared toward the main road. Emily slumped against the cold bricks, her legs shaking so hard she thought she might fall. She looked toward the black car, expecting it to be a customer or a lost driver. But as she watched, the car simply sat there for another moment, silent and imposing, before slowly accelerating into the night. Inside the black SUV, the heating was set to 70 degrees, but the atmosphere was glacial. Adrian sat in the back seat, his gaze fixed on the rearview mirror where the image of the terrified woman in the alley was fading. He had seen the way the man had cornered her. He had seen the aggressive tilt of the man's head, the way he had grabbed her coat. Adrian's jaw was tight, a muscle feathering near his ear. His hands were resting on his knees, relaxed, but his fingers were curled inward, ready to make a fist. "Did you get a look at him?" Adrian asked quietly. Dante, who was driving, nodded. Tall, brown hair, leather jacket, looked like a junkie or a low-level hustler. "Find out who he is," Adrian commanded. "I want to know his name and his relationship to her." "You think he is a threat?" Dante asked, glancing back. He put his hands on her. Adrian said, his voice dropping to a register that made Dante grip the steering wheel tighter. No one puts their hands on a woman like that unless they think there are no consequences. I want to be the consequence. The car merged onto the main avenue, leaving the dingy alley behind, but Adrian kept looking back until the diner was out of sight. The next morning, the sun shone weakly through the frosted windows of Emily's apartment. It was a Saturday, which meant Emily had a few precious hours before her shift at the hospital began. She woke to the sound of Lily moving around in the living room, pushing herself up, ignoring the stiffness in her joints. Emily walked out to find Lily kneeling in front of their small plastic Christmas tree. The girl was lifting up the tree skirt, peering behind the wrapped box that contained a pair of socks, the only gift Emily had been able to afford so far. "Mommy?" Lily called out, her voice confused. "What is it, sweetie?" "My letter is gone," Lily said, looking up with wide, hopeful eyes. Emily frowned. "What letter?" "The list. The one for Santa. I put it right here under the branch like you said, so the elves could see it." Emily's stomach dropped. She remembered seeing the folded piece of notebook paper there last night. She knelt beside her daughter, checking the floor. Maybe it fell? She moved the tree skirt, checked under the rug, even looked near the radiator. The note was nowhere. Panic flared in her chest. Had Tyler followed her home? Had he broken in while they slept? She glanced at the door. The deadbolt was still engaged. The window was locked, though the latch was flimsy. Maybe the wind blew it, Emily suggested weakly, though she knew the window hadn't been open. Lily stood up, a slow smile spreading across her face. "No. Mommy, do not be silly." "What?" "Santa took it." Lily clapped her hands. "He must have come early to pick it up. He probably couldn't read my writing from the North Pole, so he came to get it to read it better." Emily looked at her daughter's shining face and forced a smile. Right. Of course. That must be it. But inside, a cold shiver ran down her spine. Someone had been here. Across town, in the high-rise office building that served as the front for Russo Construction, Adrian sat at his desk. The morning light poured in through floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a panoramic view of the city he practically owned. In the center of his pristine, glass-topped desk sat a crumpled piece of wide-ruled notebook paper. Adrian reached out and smoothed the paper with a finger. The handwriting was large and uneven. The letters formed with crayons. "Dear Santa, I have been good. I helped Mommy wash dishes. For Christmas, I would like 1. Pink boots, size 1. 2. A book about dragons. 3. A music box that plays a song. And please make Mommy stop hurting inside. She cries when she thinks I am sleeping. I want her to be happy. Love, Lily." Adrian stared at the last line. Please make Mommy stop hurting inside. The silence in the office was deafening. He had read police reports, extortion files, and death warrants without batting an eye. But this sheet of paper, with its waxy crayon smell, felt heavier than a loaded gun. Marco stood by the door, looking uncomfortable. "I picked it up this morning. The window by the fire escape has a broken latch. It was sitting right there on the sill inside. I didn't enter the premises. Technically, just reached in." Adrian did not reprimand him. "Good work." He looked up. "What is their financial status?" "Grim," Marco said, flipping open a notepad. "Emily Carter, 28, works at St. Jude's Hospital and Sal's Diner. The rent on the apartment is 3 months behind. The landlord is threatening eviction on the 1st of the year. She has utility notices piling up, and the medical bills." Marco whistled low. "It is bad, boss. She's drowning." Adrian looked back at the crayon letter. He traced the shape of the clumsy heart drawn at the bottom. "Set up a fund," Adrian said abruptly. Marco blinked. "A fund? A charitable trust. Call it the Northbridge Holiday Assistance Program. Make it look legitimate. Funnel it through the shell company we use for the union donations. And what do I do with it?" Adrian looked him in the eye. "Pay the rent. All of it. Plus 6 months in advance. Pay the electric, the gas, and the water, and clear whatever debt she has with the landlord." Marco's eyebrows shot up. "That is a lot of cash, Adrian, for a stranger." "She is not a stranger." Adrian said quietly. "She's a citizen of my city." He picked up the letter and folded it carefully, sliding it into the breast pocket of his suit jacket, right over his heart. "Do it today." "And Marco?" "No one knows it came from me." That evening, Emily came home bracing herself for an eviction notice taped to the door. Instead, the landlord, Mr. Henderson, was waiting in the hallway. He was a sour-faced man who usually looked at her like she was a stain on his carpet. Today, he looked baffled. "Miss Carter," he called out as she trudged up the stairs. Emily flinched. "Mr. Henderson, I have half the rent for this month right here," she began, reaching for her purse. "I promise I will have the rest by—" "Put your money away," he grunted, waving a hand. "It is taken care of." Emily stopped on the landing. "What? You got lucky. Some charity group called me this afternoon. The Northbridge something or other. Said you were selected for a grant. They wired the money an hour ago. You are paid up through June." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Emily grabbed the banister to steady herself. "Paid up through June? That is what I said." He shook his head, looking suspicious. "I never heard of them. But the check cleared, so Merry Christmas, I guess." He turned and shuffled away down the hall. Emily stood there, frozen. Relief washed over her so powerfully it made her knees weak, but it was quickly followed by a sharp spike of suspicion. Charities didn't just find you. You had to apply. You had to fill out forms and prove you were destitute. She felt a strange mix of gratitude and offense. She had always paid her own way, no matter how hard it was. Accepting charity felt like admitting defeat. But as she opened her apartment door and saw Lily sitting on the floor, humming to herself, the pride dissolved. She was safe. They had a home. For 6 more months, they had a home. She closed the door and leaned against it, closing her eyes as tears pricked at the corners. "Thank you," she whispered to the empty room, not knowing who she was thanking. Later that night, the mood in the apartment was lighter than it had been in months. The crushing weight of the immediate debt was gone, and it allowed Emily to breathe a little easier, even if her heart still fluttered with every exertion. "Let us finish the tree," Emily said, pulling a box of ornaments from under the bed. Lily cheered. "Can I put the star on? You're too short." "Munchkin, but you can hand it to me." The tree was a scrawny, artificial thing that shed green plastic needles every time it was touched, but to them, it was magnificent. They hung the glass bulbs they had collected over the years, a snowman with a chipped nose, a glittery pine cone, a ceramic angel. "Okay, last one." Emily said. She dragged a kitchen chair over to the tree. Climbing onto it felt like climbing a mountain. Her legs felt heavy, as if they were filled with lead. As she rose, the blood rushed from her head. She swayed, her hand hovering near the top branch with the gold plastic star. "Mommy?" Lily asked, her voice tinged with worry. "I am okay," Emily gasped, blinking rapidly to clear the gray fog in her vision. She felt small hands wrap around her calf. Lily was hugging her leg, trying to hold her up. "I got you." "Mommy," Lily said fiercely, "I won't let you fall." The sensation of those tiny arms anchoring her was almost too much to bear. Emily bit her lip, steadying herself with a supreme effort of will. She placed the star on the top branch, her hand trembling so hard the whole tree shook. "There," she whispered, stepping down carefully and collapsing onto the sofa. "We did it." She pulled Lily into her lap, her heart thudding painfully against her ribs, underscoring just how fragile this beautiful moment really was. Outside, on the street below, the black SUV sat idling at the curb. Adrian watched the third-floor window. He could see the silhouette of the woman standing on the chair, placing the star. He saw her sway, saw the moment of weakness, and his hand instinctively reached for the door handle, ready to run up 3 flights of stairs to catch her. Then he saw her step down. He saw the 2 shadows merge on the sofa, safe and warm in their golden square of light. For a moment, Adrian let his guard down completely. He imagined what it would be like to be in that room, to feel that warmth, to have someone look at him not with fear or respect, but with that pure, uncomplicated love he saw between the mother and child. It was a dangerous fantasy. He was a man of violence. He lived in the shadows so people like them could live in the light without knowing what lurked in the dark. "Drive," Adrian said, his voice rough. Dante eased the car away from the curb. Adrian did not look back this time. He stared straight ahead, pulling his coat tighter around himself, forcing the ice back into his veins. He had paid the rent. He had done his good deed. That should have been enough. But as the city lights blurred past his window, Adrian Russo knew, with a terrifying certainty, that it was not enough. He was already in too deep, and he had no desire to swim back to the shore. The fluorescent lights of the hospital break room hummed with a low, irritating buzz that usually gave Emily a headache by noon. Today, however, she barely heard them. She sat on the edge of the vinyl sofa, gripping her phone so tightly her knuckles had turned the color of old parchment. She replayed the voicemail for the third time. "Miss Carter, this is billing services. We are calling to inform you that a significant payment has been posted to your account regarding your upcoming surgical consults and pre-procedure holding fees. The balance has been cleared by an anonymous donor. Please contact us to schedule your pre-op blood work. It had to be a mistake. Things like this did not happen to people like her. In Emily's world, the phone only rang when she owed money, not when someone had paid it." She stood up, her legs feeling unsteady, and walked down the corridor to the social services office. Mrs. Higgins, a woman with kind eyes and a desk buried under mountains of paperwork, looked up as Emily entered. "Mrs. Higgins, there has been a mistake," Emily said, her voice trembling. "Billing called me. They said someone paid the deposit for the surgery, but I did not apply for any new grants. I do not have that kind of money." Mrs. Higgins took off her reading glasses and smiled softly. "It is not a mistake. Emily, I verified it this morning. The donation was made through a blind trust. It is legitimate." "But who?" Emily asked, her mind racing. She felt a wave of nausea. Was it Tyler? No. Tyler did not have $5, let alone $5,000. Was it a clerical error that they would demand she pay back later? "I cannot tell you that, simply because I do not know," Mrs. Higgins said gently. She stood and walked around the desk, resting a hand on Emily's shoulder. "Listen to me. We have wealthy benefactors in this city who sometimes choose to support specific cases. They value their privacy, but they value helping people more. Do not question a miracle when it lands in your lap. Dear, just take it. Schedule the surgery." Emily looked at the older woman, tears welling in her eyes. The relief was a physical weight lifting off her chest, but beneath it was a lingering unease. She had learned the hard way that nothing in life was truly free. There were always strings attached. But as she thought of Lily, waiting for her at the neighbor's apartment, the fight drained out of her. She could not afford pride. She could only afford survival. "Thank you," she whispered, wiping her cheek. 2 days later, the hospital administrator, Mr. Henderson, stopped by the reception desk. He was a nervous man who always seemed to be smoothing down his tie. "Emily, I need a favor," he said. Emily looked up from her computer screen. "Of course. Mr. Henderson, what is it? The Russo Foundation, you know. The group that funded the new pediatric wing is hosting a Christmas appreciation dinner for the hospital staff tonight. They specifically asked for a mix of doctors, nurses, and support staff to represent the hospital. I want you to go." "Me?" Emily blinked. "But I am just a receptionist." "You are the face of this department," Henderson said firmly. "And frankly, you have worked double shifts for 6 months without a complaint. You deserve a night of good food. It is at Russo's downtown, 7 o'clock. Emily hesitated. The name Russo's conjured images of crystal chandeliers and menu items she could not pronounce. "I do not have anything to wear to a place like that, sir, and I have to pick up Lily. I have already spoken to the shift supervisor. You are leaving early to get ready, and bring Lily to your neighbors. I will approve overtime pay for the inconvenience." He did not leave room for argument. It felt less like an invitation and more like a command, though delivered with a smile. That evening, Emily stood in front of her small, cracked mirror. She wore a simple navy blue dress she had bought years ago for a cousin's wedding. It was modest, falling to her knees, with long sleeves that hid the faint bruising from her recent blood draws. She pulled her hair back into a low bun, trying to look professional, trying to hide the fact that she was terrified. She kissed Lily goodbye at Mrs. Gable's door. "You look like a princess." "Mommy," Lily said, touching the fabric of the dress. Emily forced a bright smile. "I will be back before you wake up. Be good for Mrs. Gable." Russo's was every bit as intimidating as Emily had feared. The exterior was polished black stone, and the interior glowed with warm, amber light. A massive Christmas tree dominated the foyer, decorated with gold ribbon and glass ornaments that probably cost more than her rent. Emily felt small as she followed Dr. Evans and the head nurse, Sarah, into the restaurant. They were led past the main dining area, where well-dressed couples clinked glasses, to a private dining room at the back. The room was intimate, with dark wood paneling and a long table set with white linen. At the head of the room stood Adrian Russo. He was speaking to a waiter, but he turned as they entered, in his tuxedo. He looked like something out of a classic film, tall, broad-shouldered, and devastatingly handsome. But there was a sharpness to him, a dangerous edge that the expensive tailoring could not quite conceal. "Welcome," Adrian said, his voice smooth and deep. "Thank you all for coming. Doctor." Evans stepped forward to shake his hand. "Mr. Russo, it is an honor. Thank you for your generosity." Adrian nodded, but his eyes drifted past the doctor, scanning the group until they landed on Emily. For a second, the room seemed to go quiet. Emily felt her breath hitch. He was looking at her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. It was not the leering look she sometimes got from customers at the diner. It was something else. Recognition? Curiosity. "And you must be Miss Carter," Adrian said, stepping forward. Emily froze. She had not been introduced. How did he know her name? "Yes," she stammered. "Emily Carter. Mr. Henderson spoke highly of your dedication," Adrian said smoothly, extending his hand. She took it. His hand was large and warm, his grip firm but careful, as if he knew she was made of glass. When their skin touched, a strange jolt of electricity ran up her arm, settling in the pit of her stomach. She pulled her hand away quickly, flushing. "Please, sit," Adrian said, gesturing to the table. The dinner was an elegant affair. Waiters moved silently, placing plates of seared scallops and risotto before them. The conversation flowed around medical funding and community outreach, led mostly by Dr. Evans and Adrian. Emily ate little. She felt out of place among the doctors and the wealthy host. She kept her head down, focusing on moving the food around her plate, but she could feel Adrian's gaze on her. Every time she looked up, he was watching her from the head of the table. "So, Emily," Adrian said during a lull in the conversation. The sound of her name on his lips made her jump. "Tell me, do you enjoy working at the hospital?" "It is difficult work," she answered honestly, her voice soft, "but it is important. People come to us on their worst days. If I can make the paperwork a little less frightening for them, then it is worth it." Adrian studied her. "That is a rare perspective. Most people just see the bureaucracy." He took a sip of his wine. "And you have a daughter, correct?" Emily stiffened. Her protective instinct flared. "Yes, Lily. She is 6. "That is a magical age," Adrian said, a shadow crossing his face. "Old enough to understand the world, but young enough to still believe in miracles." Emily looked at him sharply. There was a sadness in his tone that caught her off guard. For a moment, the powerful Mafia boss vanished, replaced by a man who looked incredibly lonely. Suddenly, a sharp pain radiated through Emily's chest. It was a familiar protest from her heart, exacerbated by the stress of the evening. She brought her hand up to her sternum, rubbing the spot unconsciously, her face paling slightly. Adrian noticed instantly. His eyes narrowed, focusing on her hand, then her face. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice dropping, cutting through the chatter of the other guests. Emily dropped her hand to her lap. "I am fine," she lied quickly. "Just a little heartburn. The food is richer than I am used to." Adrian did not look convinced. He signaled to a waiter. "Bring a glass of water, no ice." and turn up the thermostat in here. It is too drafty." The authority in his voice was absolute. The waiter scrambled to obey. Emily took the water with a trembling hand, avoiding Adrian's eyes. She felt exposed, as if he could see right through her navy dress to the scarred, failing heart beneath. By the time the dinner ended, the weather had turned. What had started as a light flurry was now a full-blown Northbridge blizzard. Snow whipped past the windows in horizontal sheets, burying the streets in white. The guests said their goodbyes in the foyer. Doctor Evans and Sarah had driven together and hurried off to their car in the parking garage. Emily, however, pulled out her phone to call a rideshare. She stared at the screen in dismay. No cars available due to severe weather. She tried another app. Wait time, 60 minutes. Surge pricing, $50. She did not have $50. Panic began to rise in her throat. She could not wait an hour. Lily would be worried, and standing in the foyer of this expensive restaurant, she felt like an intruder who had overstayed her welcome. She pushed through the heavy, revolving doors, stepping out onto the sidewalk to see if she could flag down a taxi. The cold hit her like a physical slap. The wind was brutal, cutting through her thin coat. Emily huddled against the brick wall, shivering violently. The cold air triggered her lungs, and she began to cough, a deep, hacking cough that rattled her chest and made her vision swim. She pressed a hand to her mouth, trying to breathe, but the icy air felt like needles. A heavy metal door clicked open behind her. Emily. She turned. Adrian was standing there. He had not put on a coat yet, standing in his suit amidst the swirling snow, looking impervious to the cold. "Mr. Russo," she gasped, trying to suppress the cough. "I am just waiting for a ride. There are no rides tonight," he said, stepping closer. "Look at the street. It is empty. I will find one," she insisted, though her teeth were chattering. "You are freezing," he said, his voice rough, "and you are coughing. Get in the car." He gestured to the curb, where the massive black SUV she had seen in the alleyway was idling. The sight of it triggered a vague memory, but she was too cold to place it. "I cannot," she said, backing away. "I do not want to impose." "It is not a request," Adrian said. He moved with sudden speed, closing the distance between them. He took off his suit jacket and draped it over her shoulders. The silk lining was warm from his body, and the scent of him, cedarwood, expensive tobacco, and rain enveloped her. "My driver will take you home. Please, do not argue. Think of your daughter. She needs you to get home in one piece." The mention of Lily broke her resolve. She looked at the warm car, then at Adrian's dark, insistent eyes. "Okay," she whispered. "Thank you." The inside of the SUV was like a sanctuary. The leather seats were heated, and the air was still and quiet. Dante was in the driver's seat, staring straight ahead. "We need to pick up my daughter first," Emily said apologetically as she buckled her seatbelt. "She's at the neighbor's, just a few blocks from my apartment. We will go wherever you need," Adrian said. He was sitting beside her, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his arm, though they were not touching. The ride to Mrs. Gable's building was slow, the heavy tires crunching through the snow. Adrian did not speak, but he watched her. He watched the way she huddled into his jacket, pulling the lapels tight across her chest. He looked like he wanted to say something, his hand twitching on his knee, but he remained silent. When they picked up Lily, the little girl was groggy, clutching her stuffed reindeer. She climbed into the back, her eyes widening when she saw Adrian. "Is he a prince?" Lily whispered loudly to Emily as she buckled her booster seat. Emily flushed crimson. "No, honey, this is Mr. Russo. He gave Mommy a ride because of the snow. Hello." "Lily," Adrian said. He turned in his seat to look at the child, and his face softened completely. The hard lines around his mouth vanished. "I like your reindeer." Lily beamed. "His name is Barnaby." "Nice to meet you." "Barnaby," Adrian said solemnly. "Within minutes." The rhythmic motion of the car lulled Lily back to sleep. Her head lolled to the side, her breath fogging the window. Silence settled over the back seat again, but this time it felt intimate. The storm raged outside, sealing them into a private world of leather and warmth. Emily stopped shivering, but she kept Adrian's jacket on. It felt like armor. "Thank you," she said softly, breaking the silence. "You have been very kind. I did not expect—" "You did not expect a man like me to be kind?" Adrian finished for her, looking at her profile. "I did not mean it like that," she said quickly, turning to face him. He shifted, his knee brushing against hers. The contact was brief, but it sent a shockwave through Emily that had nothing to do with the cold. She drew a sharp breath, her eyes locking with his, in the dim light of the passing street lamps. Adrian's eyes were pools of dark intensity. He looked at her not as a charity case, but as a woman. He looked at her mouth, then back up to her eyes. "You should not be out in this cold, Emily," he murmured. "Your heart. It cannot take the stress." Emily froze. "How do you know about my heart?" Adrian hesitated. He had slipped. Mr. Henderson mentioned you have had some health struggles." It was a plausible lie, but Emily sensed there was more to it. Yet, looking at him, she did not feel fear. She felt a strange, magnetic pull. "I am tougher than I look," she whispered. "I know you are," Adrian said. His voice was a low rumble that seemed to vibrate in her chest. "That is what worries me. You fight so hard. You forget to let anyone help you." He reached out, his hand hovering near her knee where the jacket had slipped. He pulled the fabric back up, his knuckles grazing her thigh through the dress. The touch was respectful, but it burned. Emily blushed. Looking away out the window, the city was a blur of white, but inside the car, everything was in sharp, high-definition focus. The smell of him, the sound of his breathing, the overwhelming sense of his presence. When the SUV pulled up to her rundown apartment building, the snow was falling harder than ever. Dante idled the car at the curb. Adrian opened the door and stepped out into the drift. Ignoring the snow soaking his dress shoes, he reached in to help Lily out, lifting the sleeping child into his arms as easily as if she weighed nothing. "I can take her," Emily protested, scrambling out. "She is heavy, and the stairs are icy." Adrian said, "Lead the way." He carried Lily up the 4 flights of stairs without breaking a sweat, while Emily followed, clutching the railing and trying to catch her breath. At her door. Emily fumbled with her keys. She pushed the door open, revealing the tiny, dimly lit living room with its mismatched furniture and the scrawny tree with the paper snowflakes. Adrian stepped inside and gently laid Lily on the pull-out sofa. He pulled the blanket up to her chin, his movements incredibly tender for a man of his size. Emily watched him, her heart aching. Seeing him in her apartment, this powerful, wealthy man standing on her worn rug, should have been ridiculous. Instead, it felt right. He turned to leave, and panic flared in Emily's chest. She did not want him to go back to the storm. She did not want to be alone with the silence. Would you like some coffee?" she asked. "It is the least I can do." "To say thank you." Adrian paused. He looked around the cramped room, taking in the peeling wallpaper, the drafty window, the sheer poverty of it, and then he looked at Emily, standing there in her simple dress and his expensive jacket, looking at him with hopeful, frightened eyes. "Coffee would be nice," he said quietly. The kitchen was so small that they had to stand close together. Emily busied herself with the old coffee pot, her hands shaking as she spooned the grounds. She could feel Adrian standing right behind her, leaning against the counter. The apartment was cold, but the kitchen felt hot. "Do you take milk or sugar?" Emily asked, her voice tight. "Black is fine," Adrian said. She turned to hand him the mug. He was closer than she realized. She had to tilt her head back to look at him. His eyes were searching her face, tracing the line of her jaw, the curve of her neck. He reached out, his hand moving slowly, and tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. His fingers lingered on her cheek. His skin was rough, calloused, a stark contrast to the softness of her face. "You have beautiful eyes, Emily," he whispered. Emily's breath caught in her throat. She stood paralyzed, the mug of coffee trembling in her hand. She should pull away. She should tell him to leave. He was dangerous. Every instinct she had told her that. But his touch was so gentle, so grounding. I do not, she stammered, unable to form a coherent sentence. Adrian stepped closer, crowding her against the counter. He did not touch her body, but his presence surrounded her. He lowered his head, his gaze dropping to her lips. For a moment, time stopped. The snow against the window, the hum of the refrigerator, it all faded. There was only the heat of his body and the terrifying, wonderful possibility of his kiss. Emily's lips parted. She leaned in, just an inch. "Mommy?" The sleepy voice shattered the moment like glass. Adrian pulled back instantly, the spell breaking. Emily nearly dropped the mug, splashing hot coffee onto her hand. She hissed in pain, setting the mug down on the counter. "I am here, baby," Emily called out, her voice shaky. She looked at Adrian. His eyes were dark, his chest rising and falling rapidly. He looked like a man who had just stepped back from a precipice. "I should go," he said, his voice rough. Emily nodded, clutching her burned hand. Yes, it is late." He walked to the door, stopping with his hand on the knob. "Lock the door after me." "Emily," he commanded, looking back at her one last time, and then he was gone, leaving Emily standing in the tiny kitchen, her heart racing a dangerous rhythm, the taste of what almost happened lingering on her lips. Over the next week, the rhythm of St. Jude's Hospital changed imperceptibly, centered around the reception desk where Emily Carter worked. It began with a scheduled meeting regarding the charity partnership, but it quickly evolved into something else entirely. Adrian Russo, a man whose name was whispered in fear throughout Northbridge, became a fixture in the brightly lit corridors of the administrative wing. He came under the guise of business. There were always papers to sign, details to discuss about the new pediatric equipment, or logistics regarding the funding transfer. Yet, invariably, these meetings would end early or start late, leaving Adrian with time to linger near the front desk. To the casual observer, he was simply a wealthy donor checking on his investment to the hospital staff. He was an enigma. The nurses whispered behind their charts, their eyes darting from the formidable man in the $2,000 suit to the quiet receptionist with the tired smile. "Is that Adrian Russo?" "Sarah, the head nurse," hissed to Emily one afternoon as Adrian walked toward the elevators. "The guy who owns half the city? He's just here for the charity." Emily deflected, keeping her eyes on her computer screen, though her heart had already begun that treacherous, rapid rhythm it always adopted when he was near. "He's been here 4 times this week." "Emily," Sarah said, raising an eyebrow, "and he does not look at the equipment. He looks at you." Emily tried to ignore the rumors, but she could not ignore the man himself. Adrian had a way of occupying space that made everything else fade into the background. When he approached her desk, the noise of the waiting room seemed to dampen. "Good afternoon, Emily," he would say, his voice a low baritone that vibrated through the plexiglass barrier. "Mr. Russo," she would reply, trying to maintain her professional mask. "Are you here to see Mr. Henderson again eventually? But first, I wanted to know if you managed to get any sleep last night. You look pale." The observations were always sharp, bordering on intrusive, yet delivered with such genuine concern that Emily found herself disarmed. He would lean against the high counter, looking out of place among the sick and the weary, and make dry, cynical comments about the hospital coffee or the bureaucracy that made her laugh despite herself. For those few minutes, Emily felt a strange sense of safety. It was illogical. She knew who he was. She knew that the hands resting on her counter had likely done terrible things, but when his dark eyes were fixed on her, she felt shielded. She found herself waiting for the sound of his heavy footsteps, looking up every time the automatic doors slid open, hoping to catch a glimpse of his dark coat. However, the bubble of safety Adrian provided was fragile, existing only within the hospital walls. Outside, the reality of her life was waiting to close in. It was a Tuesday night when the illusion shattered. Emily had clocked out late, her body aching with a bone-deep fatigue. The winter air was biting, carrying the scent of impending snow. She pulled her scarf tight around her neck and hurried toward her apartment building, her head down against the wind. She was 10 feet from the entrance when a shadow detached itself from the alcove. "You have got some nerve, Emily gasped, stumbling back. Tyler stepped into the pool of yellow light cast by the street lamp. He looked worse than he had the week before. His eyes were bloodshot, his jaw clenched tight with a mixture of rage and desperation. "Tyler, please," Emily said, her voice shaking. "It is late. I need to go inside." "Go inside to what? To count your money?" Tyler spat on the frozen pavement. "I heard about the rent. Henderson down at the pub says your landlord got paid up for 6 months. 6 months? Emily, where does a waitress get that kind of cash? It was a charity program," Emily said, edging toward the door. "I told you. Do not lie to me," Tyler shouted, stepping forward to block her path. "Charities do not just drop $5,000 on a nobody. You are sleeping with someone. That is it not? You found some rich criminal to pay your way." He loomed over her, his breath smelling of stale whiskey. Emily felt a spike of fear, sharp and cold. This was not just bluster. Tyler was humiliated, and humiliation made him dangerous. "Get out of my way, Tyler," she said, trying to summon the courage she showed for Lily. "Or what? You will call your boyfriend?" Tyler sneered. He reached out and grabbed her upper arm, his fingers digging into the flesh through her coat. "You are disgusting. You play the saint, the sick mother, but you are just selling yourself to the highest bidder." "Let go of me," Emily cried out, trying to wrench her arm free. The sudden movement sent a jagged bolt of pain through her chest, making her gasp. Tyler did not let go. He shoved her backward, slamming her shoulders against the rough brick wall of the building. "You owe me, Emily. If you have got a sugar daddy, then you can afford to pay me my share for leaving you alone." Emily squeezed her eyes shut, bracing for a hit, her heart hammering dangerously against her ribs. Then, a voice cut through the night. It was not loud. It was not a shout. It was a low, deadly rumble that carried more threat than a scream ever could. "Let her go!" Tyler froze. He turned his head, his grip on Emily's arm loosening slightly but not releasing. Adrian stood on the sidewalk, a few yards away. He was alone. He stood perfectly still, his hands at his sides, but the air around him seemed to crackle with violence. He looked like a wolf that had just decided to kill. "Who the hell are you?" Tyler barked, trying to maintain his bravado. "This is family business, pal. Walk away," I said, Adrian repeated, taking a slow, deliberate step forward. "Let her go, or I will break the hand that is touching her." Tyler sneered. But as Adrian stepped into the light, recognition dawned on the younger man's face. He saw the sharp, cold features. He saw the expensive coat. He saw the eyes that held absolutely no mercy. Every low-level hustler in Northbridge knew Adrian Russo's face. It was the face of the man who owned the streets they tried to scrape a living from. "Russo," Tyler whispered, the color draining from his face. Adrian did not stop moving until he was mere inches from them. He did not look at Tyler. He looked at Emily, his gaze sweeping over her face, checking for blood. "Did he hurt you?" Adrian asked her, his voice deceptively soft. Emily shook her head, unable to speak, her breath coming in short, terrified gasps. Adrian turned his attention to Tyler. He moved with a speed that blurred in the dim light, his hand shooting out to grip Tyler's wrist, the one holding Emily. He squeezed. Tyler yelped, his knees buckling as the pressure on his joint became excruciating. He let go of Emily instantly, scrambling back. "You are never going to come near this building again," Adrian said. He did not shout. He spoke as if he were stating a fact about the weather. "You are never going to speak to her. You are never going to look at her. If I hear that you have even walked on this street, I will have you buried under the foundation of my next skyscraper. Do you understand?" Tyler clutched his wrist, backing away, his eyes wide with terror. But even in his fear, a spark of malicious spite remained. He looked from Adrian to Emily, a twisted sneer forming on his lips. "I was right," he spat, retreating toward the darkness. "You are sleeping with him? You are letting a monster like that near my daughter? You are ruining Lily. Emily, you are dragging her into hell with you." He turned and ran, disappearing into the shadows of the alleyway, leaving his poison hanging in the cold air. The silence that followed was heavy and suffocating. Emily stood pressed against the brick wall, her chest heaving. The adrenaline that had sustained her during the confrontation drained away, leaving her knees weak and her hands shaking violently. She slid down the wall, a sob tearing from her throat. Emily. Adrian was there instantly. He knelt in the snow, ignoring the slush soaking into his tailored trousers. He reached out, his hands hovering, unsure if she would welcome his touch. "He is right," Emily choked out, burying her face in her hands. "He is right. I am bringing danger to her. I am so scared." Adrian gently took her wrists, pulling her hands away from her face so he could look at her. His expression was open, stripped of its usual guarded mask. It was raw with concern. "He is wrong," Adrian said firmly. "He's a coward and a liar. Look at me." Emily lifted her tear-filled eyes. "Let me see your arm," he said gently. She held out her arm. Adrian pushed up the sleeve of her coat, then the sleeve of her cardigan. On the pale skin of her upper arm, red marks were already beginning to darken into bruises where Tyler's fingers had dug in. Adrian's jaw tightened until a muscle feathering in his cheek jumped. His eyes darkened with a fury so profound it made the air around them feel cold. But his touch remained incredibly light. He traced the skin around the marks with his thumb, as if he could wipe them away. "I should have killed him," Adrian whispered, more to himself than to her. "No," Emily gasped, gripping his hand. "No violence. Please. Not in front of Lily's home." Adrian took a deep breath, forcing the rage back down. Locking it away behind steel walls, he looked back at Emily, his gaze softening. "Come inside," he said. "You are freezing." He helped her up, keeping a steadying arm around her waist as he guided her into the building. They moved through the lobby and up the stairs in silence, the weight of what had just happened pressing down on them both. Inside the apartment, the air was warm and smelled of cinnamon and old paper. Lily was at a sleepover with Mrs. Gable's granddaughter down the hall, so the apartment was empty and quiet. Emily sat on the edge of the worn, sagging couch. She was still trembling, the aftershocks of fear racking her small frame. She felt fragile, like a porcelain cup that had been dropped and glued back together too many times. Adrian locked the door, all 3 locks, and then walked over to her. He did not sit beside her. Instead, he knelt on the floor in front of her, placing himself lower than her, a gesture of submission that was startling coming from a man who commanded an army. He took both of her hands in his. His palms were warm and rough, anchoring her. "I'm sorry," Emily whispered, staring at their joined hands. "I am so sorry you had to see that. It is humiliating. There is no shame in being targeted by a bully," Adrian said fiercely. "The shame is his alone." Emily looked at him, her eyes searching his face. "I'm so scared, Adrian, not just of him. I am scared of the surgery. I am scared that I am going to die on that table. And if I do, Tyler will come for her. He will take Lily, and he will destroy her spirit just like he tried to destroy mine." The confession hung in the air, stark and terrifying. Adrian tightened his grip on her hands. He leaned in, his dark eyes locking onto hers with an intensity that burned. "Listen to me, Emily." His voice was a rough whisper, filled with the weight of an oath. "That will not happen. I will not let it happen. I don't care what laws I have to break. I do not care what lines I have to cross. I swore a long time ago I would never get involved personally again. But that is done. You and Lily. No one touches you. No one takes her. As long as I have breath in my body, you are safe." The conviction in his voice broke something open inside Emily. For years, she had been the strong one. She had been the shield, the provider, the protector. She had stood alone against the wind. To have this man, this dangerous, powerful, complicated man, kneel before her and offer to carry the weight, it was overwhelming. "Thank you," she breathed. Leaning forward, they were close now. The space between them was charged, electric with the sudden shift from fear to something else, something hotter. Emily looked at his face. She saw the sharp angle of his jaw, the faint shadow of stubble, the small, white scar near the corner of his lip. Without thinking, she freed one hand and reached out. Her fingers trembled as she touched his jaw, tracing the line of that scar. Adrian went still. He closed his eyes for a second, leaning his face into her palm, inhaling sharply. It was a gesture of surrender. When he opened his eyes again, they were dark with a hunger that he had been suppressing for weeks. "Emily," he warned, his voice straining, "you should be careful. I'm not a good man. I do not see a bad man," Emily whispered. "I see the man who saved us." She leaned down. Adrian tilted his head up. The first brush of their lips was hesitant, a question asked in the silence of the room. Emily's heart skipped a beat, not from pain but from anticipation. Adrian held back, giving her one last chance to pull away, to retreat to safety. She did not pull away. She pressed closer, and then the dam broke. Adrian groaned low in his throat and captured her mouth. The kiss was not gentle. It was desperate. It was the collision of two souls who had been starving for years. His hands moved from her hair to cup her face, his thumbs stroking her cheekbones as he deepened the kiss, tasting her, claiming her. Emily made a soft sound and slid off the couch, not onto the floor, but into his space. Adrian caught her effortlessly, pulling her into his lap as he sat back on his heels. She straddled his legs, her fingers tangling in the hair at the nape of his neck, pulling him closer. The world outside, the snow, Tyler, the hospital, the Mafia, ceased to exist. There was only this. The roughness of his coat against her palms, the smell of his skin, the heat of his mouth moving against hers with a rhythm that made her head spin. Adrian's arm wrapped around her waist, pulling her flush against his chest. His other hand slid up her back, pressing between her shoulder blades, holding her together. He kissed her like he was drowning and she was air. He kissed her like he wanted to memorize the taste of her soul. Emily clung to him, feeling a wild, reckless fire ignite in her veins. For the first time in years, she did not feel sick. She felt alive. She felt wanted. She arched her back as his lips trailed down her jawline to the sensitive spot beneath her ear. Her hands gripped the lapels of his jacket, bunching the expensive fabric. "Adrian," she gasped, her voice unrecognizable. He murmured her name against her skin, his hand pressing firmly against the small of her back, anchoring her to him. Then, suddenly, reality intruded. As Emily shifted, a sharp, piercing pain shot through the center of her chest. It was a physical reminder of her frailty, a jagged shard of glass in the middle of the fire. She gasped, her body seizing up. She pulled back abruptly, her hand flying to her sternum, her breath coming in shallow, pained wheezes. Adrian stopped instantly. The passion vanished from his eyes, replaced by a stark, terrifying panic. He gripped her shoulders, holding her steady but creating distance. "Emily? What is it? Did I hurt you?" His voice was ragged, laced with horror. He looked at her as if he had just broken something priceless. "No," she gasped, squeezing her eyes shut until the spasm passed. "No, just my heart. It happens when my heart rate gets too high." Adrian went pale. He carefully helped her shift so she was sitting back on the couch, supporting her weight until she was settled. He knelt before her again, but this time his hands were shaking slightly. "I am sorry," he said, his voice thick with guilt. "I should not have. I lost control. I could have killed you." Emily shook her head, her breathing slowly returning to normal. She reached out and took his hand again. "You did not hurt me. Adrian, you made me feel alive." She looked at him, her eyes wide and vulnerable in the dim light. "I have not let anyone close to me since Lily was born," she confessed quietly. "I was too afraid, too tired. I thought that part of my life was over." Adrian looked down at their joined hands. He ran his thumb over her knuckles. "I have not let anyone close since my mother died," he admitted, his voice rough. "I convinced myself that love was a weakness, that if I cared about nothing, I could lose nothing." He looked up, meeting her gaze. The desire was still there, simmering beneath the concern, but now it was tempered with a profound, terrifying connection. "But I was wrong," he said. They sat there for a long time, side by side in the quiet apartment. Her shoulder rested against his. His hand held hers. They did not kiss again. They did not need to. They both knew that the line had been crossed. They had stepped out of their separate, lonely worlds and into something new, something dangerous, and something undeniably real. And as Adrian sat there, listening to the wind howl outside, he knew with absolute certainty that he would burn the entire city to the ground before he let anything happen to the woman sitting beside him. The days leading up to Christmas were usually a time of celebration in Northbridge, but for Adrian Russo, they were a countdown ticking toward a terrifying zero. With Emily's surgery scheduled for Christmas Eve, Adrian had thrown the full weight of his resources into ensuring her survival. He was no longer operating with the subtle precision of a businessman. He was moving with the desperate force of a man trying to outrun fate. He had flown in a cardiac specialist from Zurich, a man whose hands were rumored to be insured for $10 million. He had arranged for the entire surgical wing of St. Jude's to be upgraded with state-of-the-art monitoring equipment, ostensibly a donation from the Russo Foundation, but in reality, a bespoke safety net for one woman. However, in the underworld, large movements of money never went unnoticed. In the back of a smoky billiards hall on the south side of the city, Victor Delano watched the digital trail of Adrian's expenditures with the eyes of a circling shark. Victor was a man who saw the world only in terms of leverage and weakness. "He's bleeding cash," Victor said, tossing a folder onto the green felt of the pool table. $500,000 transferred to a medical supply firm, another $200,000 to a travel agency for private charters. "What is he doing?" "Laundering." His second-in-command shook his head. "It does not look like laundering, boss. The money is not coming back. He's spending it." "Spending it on what?" Victor growled, chalking his cue stick. "Russo does not do charity unless it buys him a judge or a politician. Dig deeper. Find out who is on the receiving end of all this goodwill." While Victor hunted for a weakness, the walls were also closing in from the side of the law. The sudden influx of activity around the hospital had flagged the attention of the Organized Crime Division. Unmarked sedans began parking across the street from Russo Construction, and detectives were asking questions at the docks where Adrian's legitimate shipments came in Adrian's office. The atmosphere was toxic with tension. "You need to pull back." "Adrian," Marco said, his voice laced with urgent frustration. He paced the length of the Persian rug, gesturing to the window. "We have 3 detectives sitting on us right now. The heat is too high. If you make one wrong move with these funds, they will freeze our accounts. The organization cannot take that hit." "I do not care about the accounts," Adrian said. He was standing by the window, staring out at the gray skyline, his hands clasped behind his back. "You should care," Dante snapped. Stepping forward, "We are on the brink of a war with Victor, and the police are looking for a reason to kick down the doors, and you are focused on what? Some girl and her kid?" Adrian turned slowly. His face was a mask of cold fury, but his eyes burned with a dangerous warning. "Be very careful how you finish that sentence. Dante, she is a liability, boss." Dante pressed, though he took a step back. "We all see it. You are distracted. You are leaving yourself open. She is not a liability," Adrian said, his voice low and hard. "She is the point." He walked back to his desk and sat down, signaling that the discussion was over. "Ensure the transfer to the anesthesiologist clears by noon, and double the security detail around the hospital. If I see a single strange car near the entrance, I want to know about it." Marco and Dante exchanged a look, a mixture of fear and resignation, before walking out. They knew their boss. They knew that once Adrian Russo decided on a course of action, he would walk through fire to see it done, but they also knew that fire usually burned everyone standing close to it. That evening, the tension bled into the sanctuary of Emily's apartment. Emily was packing a small bag for the hospital. Her hands were shaking as she folded Lily's pajamas. The surgery was less than 48 hours away. The fear of the procedure was a constant, high-pitched hum in her mind. But tonight, it was compounded by something else. She had seen the black car following them when they went to the pharmacy. She had seen the way Adrian's driver kept his hand near his jacket pocket. She had seen the tightness around Adrian's eyes, the way he scanned every room before letting them enter. When Adrian arrived that night, bringing dinner from the Italian restaurant, Emily could not hold it in any longer. "Adrian, we need to talk," she said, leaving the food unpacked on the kitchen table. He stopped, sensing the shift in her mood. "What is it? Do you feel pain?" "No, not my heart," she said, wringing her hands. It is everything else. The car's outside, the way your men look at me, the way you look at the door every time a noise happens in the hallway." Adrian sighed, running a hand through his dark hair. "It is just precaution. Emily, I told you, I am keeping you safe." "But safe from what?" Emily demanded, her voice rising. "You say you are protecting us, and I believe you, but you are protecting us from a world that you brought with you." Adrian went still. He looked at her, his expression unreadable. "I cannot let Lily be dragged into this. Adrian," she continued, tears pricking her eyes, "I cannot let her grow up wondering if the car driving past is going to hurt her. She is 6 years old. She draws pictures of snowflakes and reindeer. She should not have to know what a bodyguard is." Adrian stepped closer, his presence filling the small kitchen. "You think I do not know that? Then why are you here?" she asked, the question tearing out of her. "Why are you risking everything for us? I am just a waitress. Because you are the only thing that is real." Adrian's voice cracked, the veneer of the Mafia boss slipping to reveal the desperate man beneath. He gripped the edge of the counter, his knuckles white. "Do you know what my life is? Emily, it is noise. It is violence and greed and people waiting for me to die so they can take what I have. It is cold. And then I heard a little girl ask Santa for her mother's life, and I saw you." He looked at her, his dark eyes blazing with intensity. "I saw someone fighting for something other than money. I saw love, real terrifying love, and I realized that I have nothing. I have a tower of money in a city that fears me, and I have absolutely nothing." Emily stared at him, stunned by the raw confession. "I am considering it." "Emily," he whispered. "Considering what?" "Walking away," he said, "leaving it all, the business, the territory, all of it." Emily's breath hitched. "Can you do that?" "It is not simple," Adrian admitted. "You do not just hand in a resignation letter to the Mafia. It is dangerous. It might be impossible, but for the first time in 20 years, I want to try, because I want to be the man who deserves to sit at this table with you." Before Emily could respond, a small voice piped up from the living room. "Look!" They both turned. Lily was standing in the doorway, holding a piece of construction paper. She was wearing her oversized pajamas, her hair messy from sleep. "I finished it," Lily said proudly, walking over to them. She handed the drawing to Adrian. He took it carefully, his large, dangerous hands holding the flimsy paper as if it were a religious artifact. It was a drawing done in crayon. In the center was a lopsided green triangle representing a Christmas tree. Underneath it stood 3 stick figures. One was small with yellow hair, one was taller with brown hair, and the third was a tall figure drawn in black crayon, holding the hands of the other 2. "Who is this?" Adrian asked, his voice thick, pointing to the black figure. "That is you," Lily said matter-of-factly. "You are really tall, and you are holding us so the wind does not blow us away." She pointed to the scribbled title at the top of the page. It said, "Our Family." The innocence of the image cut through the tension in the room like a knife. It stripped away the arguments, the fear, and the complex reality of their situation. To Lily, it was simple. He was the tall man who held them against the wind. Emily let out a soft sob, covering her mouth with her hand. Adrian stared at the drawing for a long time. He swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing. He blinked rapidly, fighting a battle against his own emotions. He looked from the drawing to Lily, and then to Emily. "It is beautiful." "Lily," he managed to say, his voice rougher than gravel. "I will keep it forever." Later that night, The apartment was quiet. Lily was asleep, clutching her reindeer, the drawing taped proudly to the refrigerator. The atmosphere shifted from parental to something deeply, achingly intimate. It was the night before Emily was to be admitted to the hospital. The surgery loomed over them, a terrifying precipice that they had to jump off together. Emily stood by the window, looking out at the falling snow. She was wearing a soft, worn cotton robe. Adrian stood behind her, close enough that she could feel his heat, but not touching her. "Adrian," she whispered into the glass. "Yes? Do not go tonight." The request hung in the air. Adrian stepped closer, placing his hands on her shoulders. "I will stay in the chair," he said. "I will watch the door." "No." Emily turned around, her eyes wide and dark in the shadows. "I do not want a guard. I want you. I am terrified. Adrian. I am scared that when I close my eyes on that table, I won't open them again. I do not want to be alone tonight. I want to feel like I am here." Adrian looked down at her, his expression softening into profound tenderness. He nodded once, a silent promise. They moved to the small bedroom. The room was dim, lit only by the streetlights filtering through the sheer curtains. They did not undress. The desire between them was immense, but the moment called for something deeper than skin. They lay down on the narrow bed, facing each other. Emily buried her face in the curve of his neck, inhaling the scent of him, soap, wool, and the faint metallic tang of the cold city air he carried with him. Adrian's arms came around her, pulling her flush against him. He held her as if he were trying to physically absorb her fear. "You are going to wake up," he whispered into her hair. "I promise you. I did not find you just to lose you." Emily pulled back slightly so she could see his face. In the half-light, the sharp angles of his features were softened. She reached out, her fingers trembling, and traced the line of his collarbone where his shirt was unbuttoned. She memorized the texture of his skin, the way his pulse hammered steadily beneath her fingertips. She moved her hand over his heart. She could feel it beating, strong, steady, relentless. It was the rhythm of a survivor. "Your heart is so strong," she whispered. "It beats for you now," Adrian murmured. He leaned in, his lips brushing against her forehead, her eyelids, her cheek. When their mouths finally met, it was not the desperate, hungry kiss of the hallway. It was slow. It was a communion. It was a kiss that tasted of salt and hope and terrified devotion. They shifted, their bodies pressing together along the entire length. Adrian's hand moved up her spine, his fingers splayed wide, holding her close. Emily tangled her legs with his, needing the friction, needing the weight of him to remind her that she was still solid, still real. There were no hurried movements. They lay there for hours in the dark, whispering secrets that daylight would never hear. Emily told him about the first time she held Lily. Adrian told her about the silence of his empty house. They clung to each other as the wind howled outside, two shipwrecked souls finding land in each other's arms. As the night wore on, the kisses grew deeper, more urgent, a breathless affirmation of life in the face of death. But they never crossed the final line. The intimacy of just holding and being held was more powerful than anything else could have been. Slowly, the exhaustion and the emotional weight pulled them down, and the narrative of their fears faded into the blackness of sleep. The next morning broke with a deceptive peace. Sunlight crept through the thin curtains, painting the room in shades of pale gold. Adrian woke first. He did not move. His arm was numb beneath Emily's head, but he would have happily let it fall off before disturbing her. She was curled into him, her face buried in his shoulder, her hand resting over his heart. For the first time in years, the knot of tension that lived permanently in Adrian's gut was gone. He felt a strange, alien sensation. Peace. He looked at the woman sleeping in his arms. He looked at the delicate curve of her eyelashes and the slow rise and fall of her chest. And in that quiet morning moment, Adrian Russo made a silent vow to whatever god might still be listening to a man like him. He would give her another Christmas. He would give her 50 more Christmases. If he had to tear down the sky to do it, he would. Emily stirred, her eyes fluttering open. She looked up at him, sleepy and disoriented for a fraction of a second before memory returned. She smiled, a soft, genuine smile that reached her eyes. "Good morning," she whispered. "Good morning," Adrian said, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "I am still here," she said, sounding surprised. "You are always going to be here," he replied. For a few minutes, they lay there, ignoring the inevitable. They ignored the surgery. They ignored the Mafia. They ignored the world waiting outside the door. They simply existed in the rare, fragile bubble of being cherished. But while they lay in the sunlight, the shadows were lengthening across the city. In a dingy bar on the outskirts of Northbridge, Tyler sat in a booth opposite Victor Delano. Tyler was sweating, his eyes darting around the room nervously. He looked like a man who knew he was selling his soul, but was too desperate to care about the price. "So," Victor said, his voice smooth like oil on water, "you are telling me that the great Adrian Russo is playing house?" "He is there all the time," Tyler said, his voice shaking. "He bought her furniture. He paid the rent. He threatened to kill me if I went near her. He is obsessed." "And the girl?" Victor asked. "It is her kid," Tyler said, taking a gulp of his drink. "Lily. Russo is acting like he is her father. He's soft for them." Victor smiled. It was a smile that did not reach his eyes. It was the smile of a predator that had just found the exposed throat of its prey. "Soft," Victor repeated, tasting the word. "Adrian Russo, the man of iron, has gone soft." He leaned forward. "When is the surgery?" "Tomorrow. Christmas Eve." Tyler said, "They are leaving for the hospital this morning for the prep work, but the big operation is tomorrow morning." "Perfect," Victor said. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a thick envelope. He slid it across the table to Tyler. "This is for your trouble, and for your silence." Tyler grabbed the envelope, checking the contents. His eyes widened at the cash. "What are you going to do?" Tyler asked, a flicker of hesitation crossing his face. "You are not going to hurt Lily, right? She is my kid." Victor stood up, buttoning his coat. "Do not worry about the details. You just make sure you keep us updated on their movements." Victor walked out of the bar, pulling out his phone. He dialed his top enforcer. "Get the crew ready," Victor said into the phone. "I know where we hit him. We do not hit the money. We hit the heart. We take the woman and the girl on Christmas Eve. We force Russo to come to us. And when he does, we end him." Back at the apartment, the bubble burst. It was time to go. Emily and Adrian moved through the apartment, gathering the last of the bags. The mood was somber but determined. They were a team now. Adrian carried the bags. Emily held Lily's hand. Lily held her stuffed reindeer. "We are ready," Emily said, standing by the door. She took one last look at their tiny apartment, at the plastic tree with the crooked star, wondering if she would ever see it again. "We are ready," Adrian echoed. They walked out into the cold, bright morning. Across the street, parked in a gray sedan with tinted windows, Tyler watched them. He saw Adrian help Emily into the SUV. He saw him lift Lily into the back seat. He saw the way Adrian stood by the door for a second, scanning the street, his instinct sensing danger but seeing nothing. Tyler felt a twist of guilt in his gut, but the weight of the envelope in his pocket was heavier. He picked up his phone and dialed a number. "They are leaving now," Tyler whispered. "They are heading to the hospital." He hung up and watched as the black SUV pulled away, carrying the only people in the world who had ever tried to love him, driving them straight into the trap he had helped set. Christmas Eve morning broke over Northbridge with a sky the color of bruised iron. The air was thick with the promise of more snow, a heavy, silent blanket waiting to fall. For Emily Carter. The cold biting at her cheeks as she stepped out of her apartment building felt like a countdown. She held Lily's hand tightly. In her other hand, she carried a small duffel bag packed with the essentials: toiletries, a change of clothes, and Lily's favorite storybook. Today was the day. The pre-op admission was scheduled for 10 o'clock. By tomorrow morning, her chest would be cracked open, and her life would be in the hands of a surgeon she had only met once. "Where is Mr. Russo?" Lily asked, looking up and down the gray street. He said he would drive us in the big car, and he's probably just running a few minutes late. Sweetie, Emily said, though a knot of worry tightened in her stomach. Adrian was never late. He operated with the precision of a Swiss watch. She checked her phone. No messages. Just then, a gray van screeched around the corner, its tires skidding on the icy asphalt. It did not slow down as it approached the curb. It swerved sharply, mounting the sidewalk and blocking their path. Emily barely had time to gasp before the side door slid open with a harsh metallic grind. 3 men jumped out. They wore heavy coats and ski masks. There was no hesitation, no demand for money. They moved with the terrifying coordination of a pack of wolves. "Run! Lily!" Emily screamed, shoving her daughter behind her. She tried to turn, to shield the girl with her own body, but the first man was already on her. He grabbed her by the lapels of her coat, his grip bruising. Emily fought back with the desperation of a mother, clawing at his face, kicking at his shins. "Let her go!" she screamed, the sound tearing from her throat. "Help! Someone help us!" A few neighbors were walking their dogs or scraping ice off their windshields. They looked up at the commotion, froze, and then, seeing the guns tucked into the men's waistbands, turned away, hurrying inside and locking their doors. In Northbridge, you did not get involved. "Get the kid!" the man holding Emily barked. "No!" Emily shrieked as the second man lunged for Lily. Lily screamed, a high, piercing sound of pure terror. "Mommy!" The man scooped Lily up effortlessly, ignoring her flailing limbs. In the struggle, the worn stuffed reindeer she had been clutching slipped from her gloved fingers and fell silently into the dirty snow. "Please," Emily begged, tears streaming down her face as they dragged her toward the van. "Take me. Just take me. Leave her alone." "Shut up," the first man growled. He shoved Emily into the back of the van. Lily was thrown in next to her. The door slammed shut, sealing them in darkness. The tires spun, catching traction, and the van sped away, leaving nothing behind but the exhaust fumes and a small brown plush toy lying on the sidewalk. 5 minutes later, the black SUV roared down the street. Adrian had been delayed at the warehouse by a staged fire alarm. A distraction. He realized now with a sickening lurch of his gut. He saw the empty sidewalk before the car even came to a full stop. "No," he breathed. He threw the door open and sprinted to the spot where they should have been standing. The street was empty. The silence was deafening. Then he saw it. Barnaby. The reindeer. It was lying face down in a patch of slush. One of its felt antlers bent crooked. Adrian dropped to his knees. He picked up the toy. It was wet and cold. A sound ripped from his chest, a roar of pure, unadulterated rage that made Dante and Marco flinch as they ran up behind him. It was the sound of a man whose soul had just been torn out. "They took them," Adrian said. His voice was no longer human. It was the grinding of tectonic plates. "Boss," Marco started, looking around nervously. "We have to be careful. If we make a move." "Careful?" Adrian stood up, crushing the toy in his fist. He turned to his men. His eyes were voids. There was no strategy in them anymore. No calculation. There was only death. "Find out where Victor is holding them. Call everyone, every soldier, every associate. I want everyone on the street." "Adrian," Dante warned, "if we go to war now, with the feds watching, we will burn everything down. You will lose the business. You will lose the city." "I do not care about the city," Adrian roared, slamming his hand against the hood of the SUV so hard the metal dented. "Burn it all down. If a single hair on their heads is touched, I will kill everyone who has ever said the name Delano. Get the cars. We are going to war." The warehouse was a rotting carcass of industry on the waterfront, smelling of rust and dead fish, inside the foreman's office. Emily was tied to a chair. Her heart was beating so fast it felt like a hummingbird trapped in her ribs, a flutter that threatened to stop at any second. Lily was huddled in the corner on a dirty mattress, sobbing quietly. Victor Delano leaned against the desk, spinning a silencer onto the barrel of his pistol. Tyler stood by the door, looking pale and sick. He kept glancing at Lily, wringing his hands. "You said you would not hurt them," Tyler whispered. "You said you just needed leverage." "Shut up, you junkie," Victor snapped. "Leverage only works if the other guy believes you are willing to break it." Victor's phone buzzed on the desk. He smiled, a cold, shark-like expression. He put it on speaker. "Russo," Victor said cheerfully. "Where are they?" Adrian's voice came through the phone, distorted by static but heavy with a promise of violence. "They are right here," Victor said. "Say hello to your boyfriend, Emily." Emily leaned toward the phone. "Adrian, do not come. It is a trap." She was cut off as Victor backhanded her across the face. "Mommy!" Lily screamed from the corner, on the other end of the line. Adrian went silent. The silence was more terrifying than any threat. "Here is the deal. Russo," Victor said, wiping his hand. "You want to save Mommy's last Christmas? You come here alone. You sign over the deeds to the waterfront, the construction contracts, and the unions. You surrender your territory publicly. You kneel, and maybe I let them walk. I am coming," Adrian said. "If I see one cop," Victor warned. "If I see one of your men, I end it. Right now." The line went dead. Victor looked at Tyler. "Watch the door. If he tries anything, shoot the kid." Tyler's eyes widened. I cannot shoot my own kid. Victor, then I will shoot you first, and then I will shoot her." Victor said calmly, "Do your job." Adrian did not come alone, and he did not come to negotiate. 10 minutes later, the front gates of the warehouse yard exploded inward as a heavy truck rammed through them. Gunfire erupted instantly. Marco and Dante led the charge, their men pouring into the yard, engaging Victor's crew in a chaotic firefight. Bullets sparked off the metal siding of the warehouse. The air filled with the acrid smell of gunpowder and the shouts of men fighting for their lives. Inside the building, Adrian moved like a phantom. He had entered through a side door while the distraction unfolded at the front. He moved through the dark hallways with brutal efficiency. A guard stepped out of a doorway. Adrian didn't even slow down. He disarmed the man, a sickening crunch of bone echoing in the corridor, and left him unconscious on the floor. He took a bullet to the shoulder from a second guard on the catwalk above, a hot, searing line of fire, but he didn't stop. He returned fire, dropping the man, and kept running. He felt no pain. He felt only the desperate, driving need to reach the office at the end of the hall. Every second was a lifetime. Every beat of his heart was a prayer. The door to the office kicked open, the wood splintering. Adrian stood in the frame. He was drenched in sweat, blood soaking the left side of his white shirt, his gun raised. "Stop!" Victor screamed. The scene froze. Victor was standing behind Emily, his arm wrapped around her neck, the barrel of his gun pressed against her temple. Tyler was cowering near Lily, holding a pistol with shaking hands, aiming it vaguely at the floor. "Drop it, Russo!" Victor yelled, pressing the gun harder into Emily's skin. She whimpered, her eyes locked on Adrian's. "Drop it or I paint the wall with her." Adrian looked at Emily. He saw the terror in her eyes, but also the love. He looked at Lily, curled in a ball, slowly, deliberately. Adrian opened his hand. His gun clattered to the concrete floor. "I am unarmed," Adrian said, holding his hands up. "Let them go. Victor, this is between you and me." Victor laughed, a manic, high-pitched sound. "It is over, Adrian, I won. You lose the city, you lose everything, take it." Adrian said, "Take the city, take the money, take the empire." "I do not care. Just let them walk out that door." "You are pathetic," Victor sneered. "You would give it all up for a dying woman? Yes," Adrian said. Victor's eyes narrowed. He shifted his grip on the gun. "Maybe I should just kill her anyway, just to watch you break." He cocked the hammer. "No!" Tyler shouted. It happened in a split second. Panic overtook Tyler. He saw Victor's finger tighten on the trigger. He lunged forward, not to save Emily, but to run, to escape the room before the killing started, in his blind scramble. He collided with Victor's arm. The gun went off. The deafening crack filled the small room. Emily screamed and slumped forward in the chair. "No!" Adrian roared. He launched himself across the room. He hit Victor with the force of a freight train, tackling him into the metal filing cabinets. The impact knocked the gun from Victor's hand. It was not a fight. It was an execution. Adrian unleashed every ounce of his fear and rage. He struck Victor once, twice, a brutal, bone-shattering rhythm. He disarmed the rival boss and pinned him to the floor, his forearm crushing Victor's windpipe until the man went limp. Adrian scrambled off him and crawled to Emily. "Emily, Emily, look at me!" He untied her hands with frantic fingers. There was blood on her neck. A line of red seared across her skin just below her ear. It missed. Emily gasped, clutching his shirt. "It just grazed me." "I am okay. I am okay." Adrian pulled her into his arms, burying his face in her hair, his body shaking violently. Thank God, thank God. Outside, the sound of gunfire had been replaced by the wailing of sirens. The neighbors, finally pushed too far by the war zone erupting on their street, had called 911. Blue and red lights flashed through the high windows. "We have to go," Tyler stammered, backing toward the door. "The cops are here." Adrian stood up, pulling Emily with him. He walked over to the corner and picked up Lily, who clung to his neck, burying her face in his bloody shoulder. He looked at Tyler. "Run," he said coldly. "Run and never come back." Tyler fled. Adrian looked at Emily. He could hear the police shouting orders in the yard. He knew Marco and Dante were gone, slipped away into the shadows. He could run. There was a back exit. He could disappear into the underground and rebuild. But Emily needed a doctor. Her heart was racing dangerously fast, her lips turning blue, and Lily needed to be safe. Adrian made his choice. He walked out into the main warehouse floor, carrying Lily, his arm around Emily to support her. He walked toward the open bay doors where the police lights were blindingly bright. Officers swarmed in, guns drawn. "Drop the weapon, get on the ground, I have no weapon," Adrian shouted, his voice steady. "I have civilians who need medical attention." He knelt slowly on the concrete, shielding Emily and Lily with his body until the paramedics rushed forward. He let them take Emily. He let them take Lily. And then, Adrian Russo, the untouchable king of Northbridge, held out his hands and let the officers click the handcuffs onto his wrists. He watched Emily being loaded onto the stretcher, and for the first time in his life, he felt free. The recovery room at St. Jude's was quiet. The steady beep of the cardiac monitor was the only sound. Emily opened her eyes. Her chest felt heavy. A dull ache centered on her sternum, where the surgeons had repaired her heart. Her neck was bandaged. She turned her head. Adrian was sitting in a chair next to the bed. He was still wearing his blood-stained shirt. Though someone had tried to clean him up, his left arm was in a sling. His right wrist was handcuffed to the metal rail of the bed. 2 police officers stood guard at the door. "You are awake," Adrian whispered. His face was bruised, but his eyes were clear. "You stayed," Emily rasped, her voice weak. "I'm not going anywhere," he said. "What happened? Why are you—" She looked at the cuffs. "I made a deal. Emily." He leaned forward as far as the chain would allow. "I gave them Victor. I gave them the operations. I gave them everything they have been trying to pin on me for 10 years. In exchange, they get a guilty plea from me, a reduced sentence, and full witness protection for you and Lily. Victor's organization is dismantled. Tyler is gone. You are safe." Emily stared at him, tears welling in her eyes. "You gave up your empire? For us?" Adrian smiled, a tired, crooked smile. "I told you," he said softly. "Losing the empire is nothing. Losing you, that would have been the end of me." He reached out his free hand and took hers. His fingers were warm. "My heart is fixed," Emily whispered, squeezing his hand. "And mine is full," Adrian replied. The seasons turned. Winter melted into a wet spring, which bloomed into a hot summer, and then cooled into a crisp, golden autumn. And then, the snow returned to Northbridge. But this Christmas was different. In a quiet suburb, miles away from the smoke and noise of the city, a small house sat at the end of a cul-de-sac. It had a white porch and a big oak tree in the front yard. A truck pulled into the driveway. It was a beat-up pickup truck belonging to a local construction firm. Adrian stepped out. He was wearing work boots and a flannel jacket covered in sawdust. He looked different. The sharp, predatory edge was gone, replaced by the weary but satisfied look of a man who worked with his hands. He was on supervised release, wearing an ankle monitor hidden under his jeans, but he was home. He walked up the path, carrying a Christmas wreath. It was slightly crooked. the red ribbon tied a little clumsily. He paused at the bottom of the stairs, taking a deep breath, suddenly nervous. He adjusted his collar, he smoothed his hair. The front door flew open. Adrienne Lilly, a year older and missing a front tooth, launched herself off the porch. She flew through the air, trusting him to catch her. Adrienne dropped the wreath and caught her. Swinging her around, she laughed, a bright, ringing sound that echoed in the cold air. "Look!" Lily shouted, pointing at the house. "Mommy says it is time for the tree. It is Mommy's first real Christmas." Adrienne looked up. Emily was standing in the doorway. She looked healthy. Her cheeks were pink, her eyes bright. She was not the dying woman in the diner anymore. She was radiant. She stepped out onto the porch, wrapping her arms around herself against the cold. She looked at Adrienne holding Lily, and her smile was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. "You are late," she teased gently. "Traffic." Adrienne smiled, carrying Lily up the steps. "And I had to pick out a wreath." He set Lily down, and she darted back inside to get the ornament box. Adrienne picked up the crooked wreath and stood before Emily. "It is not perfect," he said. "It is perfect," Emily whispered. She stepped close to him, sliding her arms around his waist. He buried his face in her neck, inhaling the scent of vanilla and peace. "Welcome home, Adrienne." He kissed her then, slow and deep, under the soft glow of the porch lights. It was a kiss that held the memory of the hospital room, the warehouse, and the fear, but buried them all under the weight of their survival. "Come on," Lily yelled from inside. "The star is waiting." They pulled apart, smiling, and walked inside together, closing the door against the cold, through the front window, framed by the frost. 3 figures moved around a tall, real Christmas tree. They hung ornaments, they laughed, and as Adrienne lifted Lily up to place the star on the very top, the ghosts of Mommy's last Christmas faded away completely, replaced by the bright, enduring light of their first Christmas as a family. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I hope you enjoyed the journey of Adrienne and Emily as much as I enjoyed writing it. If this story touched your heart, I would love to hear from you. Please leave a comment below telling me where you are listening from. It is always amazing to see how far these stories travel. And if you want more emotional, romantic, and thrilling tales like this one, please make sure to subscribe to Mafia Romance Stories. Share your thoughts in English in the comments section. Did Adrienne make the right choice? What was your favorite part? I read every comment and I cannot wait to hear what you think. Until next time.